Hello there everyone, Mohammed Najmi here, and today I have for you some facts about World War I. If you want to know more about World War I, check out my episode. It will be linked in the description below and it should be displaying on the card above right now. It is estimated that there were around 14 million casualties in that war, both civilians and military personnel combined, with estimates of around 20 million deaths and 20 or so million wounded. Deaths of 9 to 11 million military personnel, 6 to 13 million civilian deaths. These figures are either overestimated or underestimated, but the fact remains that this was the most bloodiest war in the history of humanity. It killed a disproportionate amount of men. In France after the war, it was reported that there were 15 women for every man between the ages of 18 to 30. Senseless loss of life. But anyway, what happened happened. Let's not spend too much time talking about the morality of war, and let's get into the interesting facts. Number 1. Germans were the first to use flamethrowers in World War I. Their flamethrowers could fire jets of flame as far as 130 feet. Number 2. And this is now a cluster of few tank-related facts. During World War I, British tanks were initially categorized into males and females. Male tanks had cannons, while females had heavy machine guns. Now, Little Willie was the first prototype tank in World War I. Built in 1915, it carried a crew of 3 and could travel as fast as 3 miles per hour. And tanks were initially called land ships. However, in an attempt to disguise them as water storage tanks rather than as weapons, the British decided to codename them tanks. Number 3. The most successful pilot of the entire war was German fighter pilot Manfred Ferrer von Richthofen, who lived from 1892 to 1918. He was also called the Red Baron. He shot down 80 planes, more than any other World War I pilot. He died after being shot down near Amiens and buried with full honors by the Allies. Francis René Fonck was the Allies' most successful fighter pilot, shooting down 75 enemy planes. Number 4. Dogs were used as messengers and carried orders to the front line in capsules attached to their bodies. Dogs were also used to lay down telegraph wires. Number 5. Herbert Hoover, who would become president in 1929, was appointed U.S. Food Administrator. His job was to provide food to the American Army and its allies. He encouraged people to plant victory gardens or personal gardens. More than 20 million Americans planted their own gardens, and food consumption in America decreased by 15%. To be honest, efforts like that in this day and age can be useful as well. Number 6. While the first military submarine, named the Turtle, was first used by the Continental Army during the American Revolution, submarines only made a large military impact during World War I when Germany launched its fleet of U-boats. Its submarines mostly stayed on the surface and submerged only to attack ships with torpedoes. Germany's indiscriminate submarine warfare was the primary reason America joined the war. Number 7. Russia mobilized 12 million troops during World War I, making it the largest army in the war. More than 3/4 were killed, wounded, or went missing in action. Number 8. France, not Germany, was the first country to use gas against enemy troops in World War I. In August 1914, they fired the first tear gas grenades against the Germans. In January 1915, Germany first used tear gas against Russian armies, but the gas turned to liquid in the cold air. In April 1915, the Germans were the first to use poisonous chlorine gas. Approximately 30 different poisonous gases were used during World War I. Soldiers were told to hold a urine-soaked cloth over their faces in an emergency. By 1918, gas masks with filter respirators usually provided effective protection. At the end of the war, many countries signed treaties outlawing chemical weapons. The Germans released about 68,000 tons of gas, and the British and French released 51,000 tons of gas. In total, 1.2 million soldiers on both sides were gassed, of which 91,198 died horrible deaths. Number 9. The term dogfight originated during World War I. The pilot had to turn off the plane's engine from time to time so it would not stall when the plane turned quickly in the air. When a pilot restarted his engine mid-air, it sounded like dogs barking, and that's why it was called a dogfight. Number 10. During World War I, American hamburgers named after the German city of Hamburg were renamed Salisbury steak. Frankfurters, which were named after Frankfurt, Germany, were called Liberty sausages, and Dachshunds became Liberty dogs. Schools stopped teaching German, and German language books were burned. Number 11. More than 200,000 African Americans served in World War I, but only about 11% of them were in combat forces. The rest were put in labor units, loading cargo, building roads, and digging ditches. They served in segregated divisions, the 92nd and 93rd, and trained separately. The Harlem Hellfighters were one of the few African American units that saw the front lines. For the extraordinary acts of heroism, the soldiers received the French Croix de Guerre, a medal awarded to soldiers from Allied countries for bravery in combat. However, in the US, their deeds were largely ignored. But eventually, World War I helped bring about the emancipation of African Americans within America. For example, Henry Ford recruited black people from the South to work in his factories. The migration of African Americans from the South to the North during World War I was one of the most significant population shifts in the 20th century. Number 12. More than 500,000 pigeons carried messages between headquarters and the front lines. Groups of pigeons trained to return to the front lines were dropped into occupied areas by parachutes and kept there until soldiers had messages to send back. So, stop being so mad at pigeons. They've done their part. Number 13. The most decorated American of World War I was Alvin Cullum York. York led an attack on a German gun nest, taking 32 machine guns, killing 28 German soldiers and capturing 132 more. He returned home with a Medal of Honor, a promotion to sergeant, and the French Croix de Guerre, and a gift of 400 acres of good farmland. Number 14. World War I also helped bring about the emancipation of women. Women took over many traditional male jobs and showed that they could perform them just as well as men. In 1918, most women over the age of 30 were given the vote in the British parliamentary elections. 2 years later, the 19th Amendment granted American women the vote. Number 15. World War I helped hasten medical advances. Physicians learned better wound management and the setting of bones. Harold Gillies, an English doctor, pioneered skin graft surgery. The huge scale of those who needed medical care in World War I helped teach physicians and nurses the advantages of specialization and professional management. Number 16. The trench network of World War I stretched approximately 25,000 miles from the English Channel to Switzerland. The area was known as the Western Front. British poet Siegfried wrote, "When all is done and said, the war was mainly a matter of holes and ditches." Number 17. More people died of the Spanish flu in a single year than in 4 years of the bubonic plague from 1347 to 1351. During World War I, the Spanish flu caused about 1/3 of total military deaths. Number 18. 4 empires collapsed after World War I: Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, German, and Russian. Number 19. Hello Girls, as American soldiers called them, were American women who served as telephone operators for Pershing's forces in Europe. The women were fluent in French and English and were specially trained by the American Telephone and Telegraph Company. In 1979, the US Army finally gave war medals and veteran benefits to the few Hello Girls who were still alive. Number 20. Edith Cavell was a British nurse who saved soldiers from all sides. When she helped 200 Allied soldiers escape from German-occupied Belgium, the Germans arrested her and she was executed by a German firing squad. Her death helped turn global opinion against Germany. 21. Mata Hari defiantly blew a kiss to the firing squad. Margaretha Zelle, also known as Mata Hari, was a Dutch exotic dancer accused of being a double agent. Though she always denied being a spy, the French executed her in 1917. 22. The greatest single loss of life in the history of the British Army occurred during the Battle of Somme, when the British suffered 60,000 casualties in one day. More British men were killed in that one World War battle than the US lost from all of its armed forces and the National Guard combined. 23. The long-term effects of World War I include the formation of the League of Nations, which laid the groundwork for the United Nations and a worldwide arms race. Additionally, the Treaty of Versailles imposed severe sanctions on Germany, which drove the country into a deep recession, setting the ground for World War II. 24. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I helped the Allies extend their influence into the Middle East. Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Palestine were declared mandates under the League of Nations. France essentially took control of Syria, and Britain took control over the remaining 3 mandates. 25 and the last one. French Second Lieutenant Alfred Joubert wrote in his diary about World War I just before he died that humanity is mad. It must be mad to do what it is doing. What a massacre. What scenes of horror and carnage. I cannot find words to translate my impressions. Hell cannot be so terrible. Men are mad. This summarizes the whole war. Humanity is mad to partake in its own willful destruction. That is all I have for you guys today. Take care, be good, and thank you so much for listening.